This is interesting because, as I have said before in this program, smokers generally tend to be lower income people. So, to a certain extent, the war on smoking
Good evening, Cambridge. I'm extremely happy to see you all tonight. It's 8:30, Channel 9, CCTV, and I'm your host, Alexandra. I'm extremely happy to see you all tonight. It's my 15th episode. This is a show where I will share with you something what I find interesting, like interviews with unique people, or interesting places, my favorite dishes, the recipes of them, and stuff like that. And I would like to thank you, CCTV, for letting me be here in front of you tonight. But tonight I will talk seriously about serious stuff. As all we know that there is a presidential candidacy for 2016, and there is some people who declare that they want to become a next president of the United States. So, as a true journalist, I would like to be ethic, and I'm just want to explain to you to show you what kind of candidates we have. So, by the way, don't forget to turn on your TV on NBC right after my show, because tonight the New England Patriots are playing versus Pittsburgh Steelers on Gillette Stadium right now, actually. But let's continue with presidential candidates. Last week, we get familiar with the George Pataki, Rand Paul, and Rick Perry. Today, I will continue to introduce you to the list of the presidential candidates 2016. So there is 5 Democrats and 17 Republicans that announced that they are running for their party's 2016 presidential nomination. To be fair, I just take them alphabetically and tell you about them. So first on my list today is Martin O'Malley. O'Malley was the governor of Maryland for 8 years until January 2015. Since then, he was visited Iowa and New Hampshire to talk about liberal priorities such as same-sex marriage and the minimum wage, calling for the raise of $15 per hour. He has been an outspoken opponent of pending trade agreements. Prior to being governor, O'Malley was the mayor of Baltimore for 7 years. His record has been criticized after the Baltimore riots in April. As governor, O'Malley signed 40 tax hikes into law. He finished Catholic University of America in political science and got his GD in University of Maryland. I found a video for you, and I would like to show it. Commercials. Here you go. Here you go. Take a look at the screen.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Josh McKelvin. He does have some work to do in the polls to get into Bernie Sanders territory, let alone Hillary Clinton at this point. But Martin O'Malley has been hitting the campaign trail hard. And this week he announced a major new initiative that parents of college-age kids probably find interesting. Governor O'Malley's our guest this morning. Good to see you, sir.
Hey, Josh. Good to see you, too.
We'll get to the politics in polls and all that in a minute. But yeah, let's talk about this. Free college at public institutions? How
Well,
does this work?
I would say debt-free college.
Debt-free. Let's
I
go
mean,
there.
this is what's happened. Over the last 15 years, we've strayed away from one of those building blocks of the American dream and an economy where wherever you start, you can get ahead. And that is by saddling our kids with a mountain of debt now when they graduate college. States and our federal government have been investing less, and the universities, when they raise tuition, put more and more of this on the backs of kids and families. And so what I unveiled today as the only candidate in this race who's actually made college more affordable as a governor. In fact, in the state of Maryland, we went 4 years in a row without a penny's increase to college tuition. I laid out a comprehensive plan to get us to a point in 5 years' time when every family will have the option to help their kid get a degree without saddling him or her with a mountain of debt. There are many leading actions that we need to take. One is for Congress to reduce the interest rates. Another is for kids to automatically be enrolled in income-based repayment plans, so it's never larger than a percentage of a student's income. But some of the others involve allowing kids to earn college credit before they're out of high school, so that knocks a year off of
What kind of
college.
timeline would the formula provide to make this possible?
Well, I've found that people work best when they're working towards goals with deadlines. So there's two that are interrelated. One is to arrive at a point where a college degree can be attained without a huge mountain of debt within 5 years. The other, and related, is to increase by 25% degree completion. Right now we have a rather perverse system. Universities make more the longer it takes for people to get their degrees. In fact, they make more if they don't recognize credits that come from a community college or another place. And so we need to change the incentives and make it all about degree completion. And reform also, look, new technologies make it possible to reduce the cost of a college education by using more online and blended learning tools. We need to allow people to return to college and finish up their degrees too.
Ambitious plan indeed. Also, something that opened a lot of eyes is your proposal or idea to get the country completely green by 2050.
That's right.
With a clear acknowledgement that global warming is happening and it's a threat to our planet.
It sure is. And in the challenge of global warming is a huge business opportunity, the greatest business and job opportunity that our country's seen in 100 years. Some states are leading the way in this already, but I believe the United States can set the goal and with presidential leadership arrive at a point by 2050 where 100% of our electricity is generated by clean sources, non-carbon emitting sources. In the southwest part of our country, a lot of the increase will come from solar. On the East Coast, maybe a lot more from offshore wind. In the state of Iowa, even as we speak today, 30% of their electricity is generated by wind that they did not have, windmills that they did not have up 10 years ago. So the state of California, I think, has set a 50% renewable energy goal. State of Hawaii, 100%. This can be done. It requires only the investment and the public will to make it happen.
One thing that speaks a lot in the Republican field that they'll point to, aside from national security, the biggest concern for this country is the national debt. You talk a lot about investment, but people might be asking, where do we cut our spending? Do we need to cut our spending, or is it just a different application of the dollars?
I believe we need both a different application of the dollars, but I also believe that we need to ask the wealthiest among us to do more. The beauty of our country is that the stronger we make her, the more she can give back to ourselves and to our children and to our grandchildren by way of opportunities. No great people ever cut their way to prosperity. But right now, the policy choices we've made, for example, taxing capital gains at a very, very low rate compared to the rate we tax earnings from hard work and sweat and toil, a much, much, much lower top marginal rate for your highest earners, the people that have, the only people that have benefited from this economy. We need to make the changes necessary so that we can invest in affordable college, a clean energy future, more opportunities for our kids. We've reduced discretionary spending, investments, to the smallest level they've been at since Dwight Eisenhower was president. The best way to reduce the national debt is to grow our economy again, allow people wherever they start to get ahead. But sadly, the economy we have right now, though better than it was 8 years ago, 75% of us are earning the same or less. So as president, I would put wage policies that allow wages to start going up again at the forefront, raising the minimum wage, overtime pay for overtime work, making it easier rather than harder for people to collectively bargain, and making it easier rather than harder for women to join the workforce.
Let me ask you about another country's financial problems. That's Greece. Do you believe that the U.S. has a role in helping this country stabilize, or is this Europe's problem?
I believe that our country's best interests are served by a rising and more stable middle class the world over. So to that end, I believe that we should continue to exert pressure on the leaders of Europe to work out a settlement with Greece so that they can stay within the European Union and not be crushed by this debt. I mean, you talk about debt. Look, they took austerity measures. They tried to cut their way to prosperity. No people have ever cut their way to prosperity. The result was they reduced, I think, their economy by 25%. You have unemployment among young people at 50% in Greece. How the heck are you ever going to pay down your national debt while your economy is shrinking? It doesn't work that way. You need a more balanced approach, and I hope the Germans will agree to give them some greater debt relief so they can repay their bills but grow their economy at the same time.
Let me ask you about the Democratic field. Bernie Sanders is surging in the polls. Hillary Clinton still remains the front runner. As I pointed out, you have some work to do to catch up. What do you make of the Sanders surge, though? I mean, is he tapped into something you've been talking a lot about, and that's income inequality?
I think that this is a summer of great discontent all across our country, and you see it demonstrated in a variety of ways. Some of those ways are in the Republican Party, with Donald Trump saying very hateful things about other people, and that makes him spike. So this is a summer of great discontent. People feel like their leaders aren't listening. People feel that their national leaders have been so influenced by big money that individuals have no role to play. But the great thing about New Hampshire is that people aren't intimidated by polls, they're not intimidated by big money, and they expect to see each of us 2 and 3 and 4 times. And if there's a couple of rules to come out of past presidential campaigns, one of them is that the inevitable frontrunner's only inevitable until the first voting happens. And the second one is, whichever candidate is surging in June is not the candidate who's surging in January. So I'm here for the long haul, intend to go town to town, living room to living room, and given the executive experience, progressive goals, progressive accomplishments, getting things done, I believe we're going to do very well come January.
So it was a video about O'Malley, and we're gonna move on to my next candidate. His name is Marco Rubio. He's 45 years old and has been a senator from Florida since 2011, after Tea Party support helped push him past Charlie Crist in the three-way general election. Prior to that, Rubio had a 9-year career in the Florida House of Representatives, 2 years of which he was Speaker of the House. Rubio's Cuban descent has been a notable influence on his support for conservative immigration reform and on Cuban-American relations, an issue he has criticized Obama heavily on. So he finished the University of Florida as a political science and got his JD from University of Miami School of Law. Let's move on to the next video I have for you.
Let me begin by saying this. I'm not new to the political process. I was making a contribution as the Speaker of the third largest and most diverse state in the country well before I even got into the Senate. I would add to that this election cannot be a resume competition. It's important to be qualified, but if this election is a resume competition, then Hillary Clinton's going to be the next president, because she's been in office and in government longer than anybody else running here tonight. Here's what this election better be about. This election better be about the future, not the past. It better be about the issues our nation and the world is facing today, not simply the issues we once faced. This country is facing an economy that has been radically transformed. You know, the largest retailer in the country, in the world today, Amazon, doesn't even own a single store, and these changes have been disruptive. They have changed people's lives. The jobs that once sustained our middle class, they either don't pay enough or they are gone. And we need someone that understands that as our nominee. If I'm our nominee, how is Hillary Clinton going to lecture me about living paycheck to paycheck? I was raised paycheck to paycheck. How is she going to lecture me? How is she going to lecture me about student loans? I owed over $100,000 just 4 years ago. If I'm our nominee, we will be the party of the future. Well, let me set the record straight on a couple things. The first is the evidence is now clear that the majority of people coming across the border are not from Mexico. They're coming from Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras. Those countries are the source of the people that are now coming in its majority. I also believe we need a fence. The problem is if El Chapo builds a tunnel under the fence, we have to be able to deal with that too. And that's why you need an E-Verify system, and you need an entry-exit tracking system, and all sorts of other things to prevent illegal immigration. But I agree with what Governor Kasich just said. People are frustrated. This is the most generous country in the world when it comes to immigration. There are 1 million people a year who legally immigrate to the United States. And people feel like we're being taken advantage of. We feel like despite our generosity, we are being taken advantage of. And let me tell you who never gets talked about in these debates. The people that call my office, who have been waiting for 15 years to come to the United States. And they paid their fees, and they hired a lawyer, and they can't get in. And they're wondering maybe they should come illegally. And so these are important issues, and we should address it. It's a serious problem that needs to be addressed. And otherwise, we're going to keep talking about this for the next 30 years like we have for the last 30 years. I, too, believe in curriculum reform. It's critically important in the 21st century. We do need curriculum reform. And it should happen at the state and local level. That is where educational policy belongs. Because if a parent is unhappy with what their child is being taught in school, they can go to that local school board or their state legislature or their governor and get it changed. Here's the problem with Common Core. The Department of Education, like every federal agency, will never be satisfied. They will not stop with it being a suggestion. They will turn it into a mandate. In fact, what they will begin to say to local communities is, you will not get federal money unless you do things the way we want you to do it. And they will use Common Core or any other requirements that exist nationally to force it down the throats of our people in our states. First of all, it begins by having leaders that recognize that the economy we live in today is dramatically different from the one we had 5 years ago. It's an economy that now has placed us in global competition with dozens of other countries around the world. Now, the big companies that have connections with Washington, they can affect policies to help them. But the small companies like the one Tanya's talking about, they're the ones that are struggling. The first thing we need to do is we need to even out the tax code for small businesses so that we lower their tax rate to 25%, just as we need to lower it for all businesses. We need to have a regulatory budget in America that limits the amount of regulations on our economy. We need to repeal and replace Obamacare. And we need to improve higher education so that people can have access to the skills they need for 21st century jobs. And last but not least, we need to repeal Dodd-Frank. It is eviscerating small businesses and small banks. Over 40% of small and mid-sized banks that loan money to small businesses have been wiped out since Dodd-Frank has passed. We need to repeal and replace Dodd-Frank. We need to make America fair again for all businesses, but especially those being run by small business owners.
Senator Rubio, thank you.
Well, Megan, first of all, I'm not sure that that's a correct assessment of my record. I would go on to add that I believe all
You don't favor a rape and an incest.
I have never said that, and I have never advocated that. What I have advocated is that we pass a law in this country that says all human life at every stage of its development is worthy of protection. In fact, I think that law already exists. It's called the Constitution of the United States. And let me go further. I believe that every single human being is entitled to the protection of our laws, whether they can vote or not, whether they can speak or not, whether they can hire a lawyer or not, whether they have a birth certificate or not. And I think future generations will look back at this history of our country and call us barbarians for murdering millions of babies who we never gave them a chance to live. Well, first let me say, I think God has blessed us. He's blessed the Republican Party with some very good candidates. The Democrats can't even find one. And I believe God has blessed our country. This country's been extraordinarily blessed, and we have honored that blessing, and that's why God has continued to bless us. And He's blessed us with young men and women willing to risk their lives and sometimes die in uniform for the safety and security of our people. Unfortunately, today we have a VA that does not do enough for them. I am proud that last year we helped change the law. We changed the law to give the power to the VA secretary, the ability to fire any executive that isn't doing their job. And it is outrageous. They've only fired one person to date. When I'm president of the United States, we're going to have a VA that cares more about our veterans than about the bureaucrats who work at the VA. You know, both of my...
Next in my list is Bernie Sanders. He has been a United States Senator from Vermont since 2007, prior to which he served in the House of Representatives for 16 years. He's now the ranking member of the Senate Budget Committee, and chaired the Senate's Veterans Affairs Committee for 2 years. Technically, Sanders is an independent and has described himself as a democratic socialist in the past. If he had chosen to run, Sanders will likely be the most liberal candidate in the race, having long championed liberal causes like single-payer health care and the extensions of Social Security in opposition to free trade. He finished University of Chicago in political science. And actually today on the news I heard that Sanders is leading right now the Democracy Party, winning Hillary Clinton for 1%. And a video about Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders represents Vermont in the United States Senate, but now seeking the Democratic presidential nomination. He's representing, or at least resonating strongly with those in the party seeing this election as an opportunity for major governmental changes. More bluntly, Senator Sanders boldly says the nation needs a political revolution. He knows government. 4 terms as Burlington, Vermont's mayor, 8 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives, now in his second Senate term. And welcome back to Iowa Press, your second visit here.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
You know, I delineated here your political career. There have been some wins, some losses, and over that time you've developed, I think, quite a sense of political smell. What makes this one smell like a victory?
What I think explains the momentum and the energy and the enthusiasm in our campaign all over this country and the huge turnouts we're getting is the people, I think, are sick and tired of establishment politics and establishment economics. I think most Americans understand that there's something fundamentally wrong when the middle class continues to disappear and almost all of the new income being generated goes to the top 1%.
That's the message that is resonating, and I want to introduce, so we can continue the questions here,
Sure.
Senator. Across the table, James Lynch, who writes for the Gazette, published in Cedar Rapids, and Radio Iowa's news director, Kay Henderson.
Senator, on the Republican side, we have Republican candidates saying their very first act as president would be to, for instance, tear up the deal with Iran or to rescind every executive order that President Obama has issued. As president, what would be the very first thing that a President Sanders would do?
I don't think there is a first thing. I think what we have got to do is work to create a movement which is prepared to take on the billionaire class, which today has so much power. And what we need is a set of policies designed to expand the middle class, end the shrinking middle class that we have seen for 40 years, and demand that the wealthiest people in this country start paying their fair share of taxes. So the agenda that we are talking about, Kay, is a federal jobs program to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, creating 13 million jobs, to raise the minimum wage over a period of several years to $15 an hour, to make sure that we have pay equity for women workers, to make certain that public colleges and universities in this country are tuition-free, and that we deal with this outrageous situation of high student debt, and we fund that by asking Wall Street to pay a tax on speculation of stocks and bonds. So those are some of the directions that we've got to move, I think.
You've also been a critic of recent trade deals, and
Yes.
some not so recent. Do you believe as president you would have the authority to unravel some of them?
Yeah, I think, look, for Vermont, for Iowa, and for virtually the entire country, trade agreements like NAFTA, CAFTA, and permanent normal trade relations with China have by and large been a disaster. I voted against all of them, and I'm helping to lead the effort right now against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. At the end of the day, I think what Americans perceive, and you ask me why there is momentum for our campaign, these trade agreements were written by corporate America, were written by Wall Street. The goal was to shut down plants in America, to stop having to pay workers in Iowa, Vermont, this country, decent wages, move to China, pay people low wages, and bring their products back in
But
America.
supported by Democratic administrations.
You're quite right. Many of these policies, you're absolutely right. Many of these policies were supported by not only Republicans, by President Clinton, and unfortunately President Obama. They are bad policies. They are opposed by and large by every trade union in this country, and I believe by the majority of the American people. At the end of the day, The American worker should not be forced to compete against people in Vietnam who make 56 cents an hour minimum wage.
How do you roll back the clock on those agreements?
Well, you renegotiate agreements. And what you say is, look, we want agreements that work for the American middle class. I want to see, we have lost, just to review, since 2001, we have lost almost 60,000 factories in the United States of America and millions of decent paying jobs. Not all of that is attributable to trade, but a lot of it is. And at the end of the day, if corporations can shut down in America, pay people 25 cents an hour, 50 cents an hour someplace else, that's what they will do. And we have got to stop that. We have to demand they reinvest back in this country and provide decent paying jobs here.
Listening to you, no one would doubt that you sound like a Democrat, but you've always identified as an independent. When will you become a Democrat, or when will you put that D behind your name? And do you have to do that soon?
No, we don't. As it happens, I'm obviously running in the Democratic caucus here in Iowa, the Democratic primary process around the country, and we will fulfill all of the requirements that the authorities need us to fulfill. As it happens, as is the case for Howard Dean, who ran for president, for my colleague in the Senate, Pat Leahy, you don't register in the state of Vermont as a Democrat. You just can't do that. Nobody can do that. What you do, and what I have done for years, is been a member of the Democratic caucus in the House and now in the Senate. I'm the ranking member on the Budget Committee, former chairman of the Veterans Committee, where we work very hard for veterans' rights. And I have helped Democrats get elected throughout the state and throughout the country. So I think my credentials are pretty strong.
But Senator Leahy or Governor Dean didn't say they were independent. They said they were Democrats. Why the distinction?
Well, historically, the distinction is, and the reason that I ran as an independent.
And unfortunately, we don't really have too much time to finish the video, but first of all, I would like to say thank you all for watching me tonight, and I will see you next week, 8:30 as usual. I'm sorry, next week we have a barbecue party here in CCTV, so if you would like, please check our website to get some tickets, and I would love to see you there. So, thank you for watching me tonight. I hope you'll have a great weekend, a great day, great night, and everything else. So,